Howdy, folks. Welcome back to PEEKABOOS. This episode is going to be a little different from our usual format. Normally, we talk about movies fresh out of the theater, but today I'm joined by award-winning filmmaker Jethro Waters to talk about his new film, Gunfighter Paradise, a dark comedy horror that he wrote, directed, shot, edited, and scored himself. The film follows Stoner, a troubled hunter returning home from North Carolina after the death of his mother, where he's confronted by strange visitors, religious visions, and a deep, unsettling collision of faith, violence, and Southern culture. I wouldn't say our conversation spoils the film, but we do get into the characters, themes, and some of the real experiences that shape the story. I wholeheartedly recommend the movie, and if you're looking to support a great indie film, it's definitely worth checking out. And with that said, thanks for coming on the show, and a big thanks to your publicist Kelly for helping set this up.
Yeah, no, Kelly's great. Everybody that she's put me in touch with, I've had a good time talking to, so glad to meet you.
Likewise. How long have you been directing?
Let's see. So I went to the University of North Carolina, Asheville for international studies, and I had been doing photojournalism freelance for quite a while I was there, and then finished up in 2013. And right after that, I started working for an academic publisher, making just everything. I had made some documentaries and different kinds of lyrical films while I was in undergrad to turn in for projects, and got really involved in making films around between 2010 and 2013 is when I really leaned into it. And then right after my undergrad, I started working for that publisher, and I was basically their multimedia department. So I just did everything: animations, documentaries, short narratives, whatever they needed done, directing voiceover actors for pieces like that. So that's when it really got going. And luckily, really wonderful musicians that were in Asheville, that were in my circle of friends, asked me to come start directing music videos, and everything just kind of took off from there. And that was right around 2015, 2016 was when I started to direct and shoot a lot of things and work on films.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. You sound like a man of many hats, because looking at the credits for the movie, you've done it all. The sound, the cinematography, directing, and the writing, too. It's not easy to do all of those things, but when you have that cohesive vision, it's easier to express it coming from one person than trying to delegate.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed doing all the different parts of film. And a lot of people talk about the difference between documentary and narrative. And it is really true that documentary is so much harder than narrative in so many ways, especially when it's just you, a camera, and you've got some sound equipment. My first feature was a documentary about a really well-known photographer, and it was just me chasing him around, and he's a complete wild man, and it was an absolute blast. But, you know, when you're kind of running solo that way, it's really stressful, but it's a fun thing to go through all the different parts and go through the writing process and the storyboarding process all the way through shooting the film and editing film, the coloring the film, and doing all the pieces, because it does give you a really great tool set to be able to approach anything after that.
Yeah, it's kind of like building a car, right? You learn how to do the interior, you learn how to do external work, body, everything that would go into making non-documentary film.
Absolutely. You know, I would not consider myself a master at any one of the crafts in filmmaking, but, you
But
know,
even
it's
just a little bit of knowledge helps out a lot.
100%. I always tell students, if you're not already editing, you need to start editing and working in Resolve with color, because no matter what you choose, directing or writing or cinematography, or if you want to do all of them or just one of them, it's really helpful to understand how rhythm in an edit works and how it feels. Because once you have a lot of that experience, once you step on the set of a narrative or a music video or a commercial or a documentary, as a director, you can think about how is this going to come together once everything is said and done and we're in post-production and we're putting the final touches on this. How am I going to make sure that I have what I need to make that work? And having a lot of experience in the editing room is a really powerful thing to take on set with you.
Okay, so I gotta know, like, what are your horror influences, man? Where do you come from in that regard?
I really love horror in a very specific way. I wasn't able to watch horror movies growing up because my parents were super strict as far as what I was able to watch. But when I got to sneak away, the first one that really grabbed me, other than, you know, the Nightmares on Elm Street and all those wonderful films that we all know from the 80s, was The Shining. That was the first one that I watched that just really blew my mind as far as it being a cinematic masterpiece, on top of being absolutely terrifying in a much different way. And then after that, I discovered Cronenberg. And Cronenberg, for me, is just the best. I rewatch his movies all the time. So Scanners and The Shining got me into the genre.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you too on the body horror and the unique voice of a visionary film director. The Thing is my favorite movie, so that's John Carpenter, Cronenberg adjacent. Nowadays, I think the kids would call The Shining a vibe-heavy film. You really feel the emptiness, but the impending menace of the hotel in almost every scene. It's so good.
Yeah, from beginning to end, it's just a masterpiece. I love that thing as well. There's a lot of John Carpenter's work that I've come to love over the years. But yeah, the body horror thing for me, I'd seen a few things when I was a lot younger, just like little clips at friends' houses. But it wasn't until I was a little bit older, my late teens, early 20s, that I really got deep into Cronenberg's filmography and figured out how much I love that stuff.
Yeah, it always happens when you're young. You mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street. I had a slasher phase when I was in middle school, and that's what got me into the genre as a whole. But over the years, I've
Hmm.
become a little more refined in my taste. I like kind of a singular experience instead of the things that were just kind of cranked out. So I'd be interested to know, before we go into more pointed talk about the movie, were there any experiences in your life in regard to horror that inspired the content of the movie?
Yeah, there's several things. One, the part about the mother's toe getting severed by the burning stove being dropped on it, that's a true story. That's actually my mom's foot in the film. She has webbed toes, and one of them is missing because a giant cast iron wood stove was dropped on it when we were moving from Texas to North Carolina. I must have been 7 when that happened. And we still have the stove. I still have it. It's got to be 350, 400 pounds. And so they were just kind of moving it across the floor using a 2x4, just kind of a little lever. And that's the story in the film. My mom, for some reason, was in flip flops, and she was helping out, and it came off the 2x4 and it severed the ring toe on her foot. And I remember her screaming and blood everywhere, and a toe and a towel. And my dad picking her up, like calling the ambulance. And she came home with these stitches in her toe, and it was wild. Absolutely horrifying for a 7-year-old, but I thought it was both too horrific and also too funny to not include in the film. And when I told my mom, I said, I'm going to film your foot, she just laughed because she knows who she's dealing with. She just laughed and said, "Okay, buddy, let's do it." And she definitely got a big kick out of seeing the final product.
Did she ever talk about like it affecting her balance? Because I hear like when you lose a toe, you need the digits to kind of like keep
Yeah,
yourself
yeah, she
oriented.
did. She has had to adjust. She has had to orient, herself in a different way. She's totally fine. It took it off halfway, so there's still half a toe there. But it was one of the most horrifying things I can remember for sure. Our family relocated when I was 11 to very rural North Carolina, to an old 1880s farmhouse. And it had like 9 rooms in it. There's no insulation, and we had that wood stove. That's how we heated the house. It was really brutal during peak summer, really brutal during the peak of winter. But it was really great because we had so much space. And it was also really cheap because there was just no insulation. It was from the 1880s when my parents were renting it. But my sister and I, this was when I was in elementary school and she was in middle school, we would wake up in the middle of the night and we'd walk out into the hall and look at each other. And she would whisper to me, "Did you hear that?" And it was one of those houses that's so sturdy, but it's also, there's no insulation. So you could always feel somebody walking around. You always knew when
Yeah, it's
somebody
got
was
like a
walking
heartbeat
around. You could hear it.
almost.
Exactly. And so we figured out the house was definitely alive pretty quickly because we would always wake up at the same time. We knew when my mom and dad would get up and go to the bathroom or whatever, we knew that was a very different feeling. But the house would move and feel somebody walking around, and her and I would get up and kind of sneak to each other's bedrooms and ask each other about that. And then we always heard people talking. My parents were always out by 10 p.m. And we would always hear voices and people talking. We would hear old music playing. There was
Ooh.
no explanation for it. We were way out in the middle of the woods. And her and I were never superstitious people. But after we lived in that place, we were convinced. We got really used to it. So we just kind of accepted it.
I grew up in Virginia, so I know a lot of what you're talking about. Virginia is like a mix of metropolitan and then just pure South, farmhouses, fields, woods. And there's just that feeling
Yeah,
in any old house that there's like an energy soaked into the walls.
it's very true. You can feel the difference. I rarely feel truly at home unless I'm in an older house of some kind. I loved that place.
It's evident in the movie too that a lot of the locations, specifically Stoner's mother's house, feels very lived in. Like you've been there, you've been in those experiences. You know what it's like to cook in that house. You know what it's like to drive down like the long winding driveway during any given season, walk through the woods. It's something that like
Exactly. I mean,
makes me
that's
feel very nostalgic for like the running through the woods and playing paintball with friends and houses just like that when I was little.
and that was absolutely the intention. Is we spent weeks driving around trying to find a house because the house I grew up in is no longer there.
Would you
We
have
spent
shot it
weeks
there?
driving around looking for. Oh, 100%. If it was still there, there's no question. I mean, 95% of the dreams that I have take place in that house. It was much smaller, and the one I grew up in wasn't stone, but everything on the interior and all the woods and everything on the exterior felt exactly like where I grew up. And so, just like you, when I saw that house and when I went inside it, I was like, "Oh man, this is it. This is the spot." Everything is exactly how it was when I grew up, and it has a very specific, nostalgic, ghostly feeling to it. It played so perfectly.
Yeah, it really speaks to you. Were the farmhouses outside part of the set or was it shot somewhere else?
No, the barn was right behind the house. All of the fields, where the couch pull scene happens, all of that happens on that one location. It was probably about a 15 or 20-minute drive from where I actually grew up in this place called Cherryville, North Carolina. It's called Cherryville, but everyone says Cherryville or Cherville, North Carolina. So that's basically where 90% of the movie is. And it was a friend of my mom's actually who had that location, and we reached out to her, and she said, "Oh yeah, it's been abandoned for 11 years, so you're free to shoot your movie there." And we showed up and found everything that we needed. It was really, really kind of magical.
Probably always comes together like that. There has to be a little bit of luck, a little bit of kismet, a little bit of, oh, this was definitely meant to happen this exact way, and I gotta honor that.
100%. I mean, there's always happy accidents that pop up that change your film or make them better, as long as your eyes are open enough to be able to see when the good thing lands in your lap and be able to utilize it. For instance, the mummified cat that shows up in Eugene. Yeah. So that was a total accident. I was walking around making shot lists, looking around at the time of day that I wanted to shoot things. And I was out in the barn behind the house. And then all of a sudden I feel and hear a crunch under my foot. And I was like, what is that? And I looked down, and in the dust next to all these farm tools, there's this cat with its fangs and an eye hole and some claws. I had no idea what it was. I kind of like brushed off the dust and realized that there was this perfectly preserved leather mummified cat. I looked at it and just immediately was totally grossed out, but also thought, well, what a magical thing to find, and also kind of hilarious. So I got some gloves on and picked it up and dusted it off. And I just thought, I've never seen one of these. I don't know anyone who has seen one of these. I don't know how it's going to work, but I'm putting this into the film because it would be an absolute tragedy not to. And those kinds of things happen throughout the production. The film is just really a satire on religion, and specifically in America. I grew up in that world. I know it inside out. And it's always been a deep part of my storytelling and the things that I choose to write about. And my American experience is deeply embedded in growing up in that culture and in that world, and how they kind of started to split apart for me in my early teens when I started to open my blinders just a little bit and look at the rest of the world. And it definitely changed when I started actually traveling outside the United States and talking to a lot of different people from a lot of different places. The American brand of Christianity has become this really strange hybridized thing where we live in a fear-based culture and it's spirituality based in fear. And I think it's become this really incredible empire of greed based on fear. And I wanted to kind of think about a character that somebody I could have become pretty easily if I had just stayed in one track, and I could have actually turned into that guy. But I just wanted to take it to the absolute extreme of what happens to a person when they confuse gut instinct with the voice of God, and they confuse the teachings of Jesus, what he actually said in the Bible, versus this bastardized and hybridized version of modern Christianity, to where there's these warrior Christians running around cosplaying as commandos.
The Southern brand of it specifically intertwines with patriotism and masculinity and just a sense of purpose, or searching for a sense of purpose.
Exactly. And that's kind of it, right? Searching for your destiny and your search of purpose. And oftentimes you'll hear people invent their destiny and their sense of purpose based on some kind of strange mutant of patriotism, religion, and masculinity, because we all grew up watching Rambo. And so, it turned into something really dangerous. And that's what the film is based on. There's a lot of silly, dry humor to kind of try to counterbalance the darkness of it all.
And it's done well because no character feels like a caricature. Everybody feels like an actual person that may just be in a strange situation.
I'm glad it landed that way for you, because that's the last thing I want to do is just make some silly caricature that doesn't do justice to the South.
If I could ask a question, specifically Maurice, I don't know if you've ever seen The Return, Twin Peaks: The Return by David Lynch.
No, I've got the original on VHS, but I haven't seen The Return.
The Return is crazy, dude. It's literally just David Lynch doing 18 episodes of TV where he just incorporates everything he's ever done into this big love letter. But there's like an evil version of a character, and he's got that Maurice aesthetic, man. Just all black leather, motorcycle, almost like personified evil.
I love that. I'm a massive Lynch fan, and it's one of the things that I've kind of put on my list as like, make time to watch this very thoroughly. And I haven't done it yet, but I'm excited to look at it. When I was thinking about Maurice, what I wanted was absolutely that evil personified. That's another reason he doesn't have one line of dialogue, because he doesn't need it. And what's funny is my friend Alex, who is an amazing musician who plays Maurice in the film, is the nicest guy on the planet. I mean, like pure gold. I'm trying to think of other experiences that would have bled into the film. The wood stove that kind of keeps coming up as a theme I remember falling into it when I was a kid and burning my hands and then, actually blistering up all over. So this really wonderful thing that was the center of survival and warmth for us. And also this kind of tortured us in a way where it took my mom's toe and hurt and blistered my hands. I'm sure that subconsciously that was in there when I was working on the film. I mean, I've had other experiences where when I was living in Wilmington, that I was waiting tables and I deposited some money in the ATM that night. And the intersection of Oleander, right there, the mall in Wilmington was, this drunk guy ran a red light 60 yards from where the ATM is and hit this girl that was going to UNCW at the time. And she was in a Forerunner. And I've never heard a louder noise in my life, but he was probably going 55. She was going to at least 45. He ran the red light and hit her on the front. And this explosion happened where I heard this noise right next to me. And I turned my head, of course, and she actually did like a James Bond barrel roll. He hit her so hard and landed upside down, still rotating and spinning and grinding as I dropped my bike and sprinted over there. The car was still rotating as I was running around trying to get the driver door open. But the horror of it all was not just seeing that. I saw a shoe over here, a shirt over there, a pool of dark liquid next to the car over here. I thought she had gotten hit and her foot flew off. And when I yanked the driver door open, she was perfectly fine, sitting upside down in her seatbelt with her hair hanging down. And I said, "Are you okay?" She goes, "Yeah, I'm fine. Just get me out of here." And so I clicked the seatbelt and kind of carried her out. And then I found out there was no foot in the shoe, and the dark liquid was just liquid from the vehicle.
Like oil or something.
Yeah, something like that. So she was totally fine. But as I was sprinting over the car, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm about to see some absolute carnage." But I went over to the guy who was drunk, and he had blasted his head across the windshield and on the steering wheel. And he was alive, luckily, but his face was totally mangled. And he told him not to move, waited for the cops to pull up. But I don't know if that has anything to do whatsoever with the film, but that is another terrible, terrible, horrific moment that I witnessed. But luckily, everyone survived. But it is definitely a love letter as much as it is a satire. It's not just poking holes and making fun of the South, because I'm a Southerner. A lot of people don't understand it, and, the gospel songs that are being sung by Joel and Margarita, who actually go to church and sing gospel songs, they're not goofing off. It's not making fun of that culture. It's something that's paying reverence to it, while at the same time doing what we should all be doing and not taking ourselves extremely serious and trying to look for the faults and the foundations of what we believe in.
There are those little moments of like delicious contradiction and irony, like Stoner having face paint on constantly, but it just makes it more visible.
Right. Nobody really addresses it. They all see it, but they don't address it.
They just kind of do their nod of like, oh, okay, that's a choice.
Right, exactly. That he's going for it. He's just going to do that. But going back to the characters you were saying that felt like real people, I knew it was going to be a hyper low budget. I was just going to spend my own money on it and make it however I could make it. And the way that I knew that I could make it quickly and not have to spend 2-3 years fundraising and, finding a casting director and going through all of the process that you need to go through. I thought, I have a lot of friends who are extremely talented musicians who are not afraid to perform. Even though they're not actors, I think they could probably pull it off if I write each one of these characters around them as human beings. Because I've known all these people my whole life. And so the way the script was written was I knew I had all these casting characters. I had the story and how I wanted it to go. I wrote Joel around Joel. I wrote Stoner around the extreme version of people that I've known in the past. And, the Confederate soldiers, Mike and Rob, these are all just my best friends. And the brother is Herbie Abernathy, who goes by the stage name Valiant himself, who plays in the lead singer for the metal band Valiant Thor. These are all people I grew up making things with, making my first movies and playing music with. And so I wrote the script to be as close to them as possible. So that way they didn't have to come and be intimidated and try to perform as actors, since there's nobody in that film except for Jessica Heck, who's, a very well-known actress. She does voiceover in the film as the mother, but nobody else that's on screen has ever acted in anything previously. And one of the reasons I think it works is because I wasn't married to the script. And when we went to shoot it, if something was dry or wasn't landing, that's feeling weird and flat to me. I don't like that. And they're like, yeah, I don't like it either. And I was like, how would you say that line if it was just you saying it? And every time we did that, it worked. And so we never really had to do anything more than, 2 or 3 takes. So it's really fun to talk about all my friends who have never acted before coming across as this really great cast because they're really just playing themselves. Like Joel, for instance, the other kind of the co-main lead in the film is actually an
actual dude, though.
The actual dude. Joel is actually, at that time, he was working as a cable installer for internet. So that was 100% authentic, is Joel showing up as Joel, he's kind of riffing in the movie and making jokes. That's just Joel being Joel.
Props, dude, because he's the heart of the movie. He humanizes almost everybody he comes into contact with. Is like if you encountered Stoner out in the world, you'd be like, oh no, like this dude's kind of crazy. He's got a screw or two loose. But Joel treats him like a human being.
100%. Without Joel, without the best buddy who's there to kind of accept you for who you are, even though you might have camo face paint on and be talking like a psychopath, for Joel to be there and to be the everyman who everyone can relate with and be like, okay, well, if I had a crazy friend I hadn't seen in forever and I showed up, probably try to treat them with some dignity. And he's the reason that people are able to empathize with Stoner. And to get him in there and to give him several sheets of script and to have him go through it and to knock it out of the park, he did such a good job. I was like, man, all of you need to be doing a lot more acting because you're doing such a good job.
It's also probably easier to do that with somebody that when they ask you for something, you know what they mean specifically.
Exactly. And it wasn't brutal and hard for really anybody because, for one, we didn't have time. Everybody's got kids and jobs and, they're taking off work and they're calling in sick and they're coming on nights and weekends to be in the film. And the only thing that ever tripped anybody up was that we're all so comfortable with each other that sometimes people would forget and they would speak to each other in a very casual manner in a way that we already knew they knew each other. When I was behind the camera, I'm like, oh, no. So just remember, you don't actually know him. And they're like, oh, right. It's also just makes for a really fun set. There's no egos, there's no bullshit. It's just a bunch of friends making a movie, which is a really magical thing to get to be a part of.
It's part of why I'm singing the praises, because it comes across too. You feel like you're a part of this world. The way that it opens on Stoner giving you information about his life, how he lost his virginity, his dad teaching him to shoot. To everyone else in the movie, he might look crazy, but you sympathize with him as the viewer, and you're willing to hear him out. Even after he's telling you, like, God talked to me and told me to take care of business. And that could mean almost anything. It really depends on where his head's at to see where that path ends. But
right. You never know how things are going to land, right? And so it's been a delight for me to hear you say that, and in general for audiences to really get a lot out of Stoner when you wouldn't take someone like that seriously in any other circumstance. But I hope this is a situation where people can watch someone with his camo face paint on the entire movie, and it's become relatively accepted and normal pretty quickly to where you kind of forget about that and you just see this guy who's pretty lost. For some people, it's probably going to be way too over the top. And that's fine, but it's been a beautiful thing to get to hear folks who can sympathize with Stoner and his madness and see that there's something in there that's redeemable, even though he keeps choosing wrong.
And I think the abstract helps it. Like, as a viewer, this might not be a world you entirely understand on first viewing, but everything is in there for a reason, and there's always something to dig a little deeper into. Mm-hmm. Like the camo face paint, this man is always at war with something, whether it's inside of himself or just a purpose he was handed.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And that's something I had really spent a lot of time working on way before we did the film, was trying to figure out how to make the film a puzzle box of sorts, to where it's not disorienting enough to where people are like, I have no idea what's going on in this film. This is madness. I wanted people to really understand Stoner and his intentions, who he is, where he is, what he's doing. But I also wanted to really tie a lot of things inside of it to where it is a puzzle box to explore and to draw a lot of different conclusions and to find a lot of things throughout multiple viewings. And I haven't met anyone who didn't understand the film and was like, I have no idea what's going on, and I left the film completely confused. I've yet to meet anyone that said that. It goes in a lot of directions and it's not linear. It's very surreal and weird at times, but I'm glad the puzzle box intention seems to be working.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think I was lost at any point, but have you had anybody that comes from maybe like a more urban upbringing or just like lived in a city that, comes from a completely different walk of life? Have you heard their take on it? Did they feel like they lived in that world too, or was it completely alien and they felt like they were learning about a new way of life, just how other people have grown up?
Yes, and the best story that I have, there's been a lot of those conversations from people who live like up north, New England area. But the best story of all of those, my executive producer on the film was Nancy Bursky. And Nancy was extremely well known in the documentary world. She founded River Run in Durham, North Carolina, which is the best documentary film festival ever. But not only that, she was really renowned for her documentaries. She made, I think, 7. Her and I met at River Run, and she did the Q&A for my first feature, was a documentary about the photographer. And we just became fast friends, and we realized that, I live Midtown East, and she lived 20 blocks north of me. After our Q&A, we just really connected. So Nancy took me under her wing and just took me to all the BAFTA screenings and Academy screenings, and introduced me around New York, and I met so many people through her. so many good things happened to me in my career because of Nancy. We were working on 3 films when she passed away. But the best story I have about watching the film from a very different world and getting a different perspective is Nancy, because Nancy, this is her description of herself after she watched the cut for the first time. She said, Jethro, I'm a New York Jew, 78 years old. I learned more about the South from this film than I have through anything else. And she lived off and on in Durham, North Carolina because of the film festival. So she was between Manhattan and Durham all the time. There's so much in this film about the South and Southern men and Southern masculinity and religion and just life in general that I had never really considered, even since she had been in Durham off and on since like the year 2000. So that was kind of incredible to hear someone who was as brilliant and experienced as her coming from Magnum Photos in the 80s. Then she was a New York Times photo editor, and she was, this director and the founder of this amazing film festival. To have Nancy come and say something like that was really kind of a profound moment for me, where I realized there's a lot here for folks who are not from the South and don't really understand the culture deeply to gain from this film.
You really couldn't hope for any better feedback. And it just speaks to how much care was put into things. When Stoner's making breakfast for Joel, the way I don't know if it was coffee or molasses he poured in, but to make like a gravy, that's something that's like, you must have seen that done that just add that in.
Yeah, so that's a thing called red-eye gravy. I'm not sure what all states do it, but it's definitely a deep in the middle of the woods southern thing in North Carolina. And it was one of my dad's favorite things when he was growing up. He's originally from North Carolina. So what they do is you cook, they call it country ham, and it's like a slab and super salty piece of ham. And they'll cook that, and all the fat, they'll cook out of it as they cook it for part of breakfast. And I do it with bacon because I think it's much better with bacon grease. But people will argue there's only one right way to make red-eye gravy, and I think they're full of shit because it's much better with bacon grease. So the way that we made it was you cook bacon down until it's crispy and you have all of this fat in the cast iron. You'll see people make this in restaurants in the South. They'll take that pork fat and then they'll pour black coffee into that and let that cook for a little while until it gets kind of thick. And then you pour that out, and that's the red-eye gravy. And so you pour this bacon grease / coffee that's been cooking in this cast iron, and you pour that over grits. And it's something that no one should eat more than, once or twice a year because it's got to be one of the most unhealthy things ever. But it is absolutely incredible. It's a beautiful thing.
It's just little moments of characterization like that, man, that really get it for me. And to jump to another random one, I'm sorry, I'm kind of just jumping around saying things I like, but
no, this is fine.
When you're first introduced to Morris, he's stabbing the dude, and the way he just keeps doing it after it's clear the dude has already died. It's almost like a mechanical impulse. So like he's just not done with it yet.
What's funny about that scene is it goes on for so long that I was laughing really hard while we were doing it. And I was so proud of Alex, my friend, keeping a straight face. I told him, I said, just keep going until I just say stop. And it's going to feel like we're going too long, but just keep going. It's gotten to people twisting their neck and being like, oh my God, and getting really creeped out because it goes on for so long. But it's also done what I hoped it would do at some screenings, where after about the 5th or 6th time, somebody bursts out laughing.
There's that expression that horror and comedy are essentially the same thing. It just depends on how it's shot or like the track behind it, how the music is.
There's never been a truer statement. I don't know who said that first, but they nailed it. I love that saying. And it's so true because I knew some audiences were going to take it as just hyper violent and be grossed out. But I assumed that some were gonna take it how they did. And I can't remember what festival we were at, but the people were like, ooh, and you got people grunting the longer it went. And then one guy started cackling about the 4th stab. And by the 6th or 7th stab, he was openly just belly laughing. And then he in turn made the entire crowd totally lose it. And that was when I was like, okay, we got him. It worked.
Yep, got across. And the way he rubs the air fresheners on himself, and it almost goes to like a sexual place, and you're like, that's wild. Like, viewed in isolation, if you're the only person watching the movie, you're like, oh my God, this dude's sick. But with a group of people, you start laughing.
Right, yeah. Basically the budget that I spent on this film was for prop and for production design and to buy tequila and Mexican food and feed everybody and pay for hotel rooms when people needed to come in town, because we were way out in the woods. And so working with something that limited was really great in the way that whatever completely insane idea that I'd cooked up, we got to do it. And there was nobody standing around being like, that's too much. It was absolute complete freedom to take it as far as you want to.
Is that kind of like the stench of death is always on him? So he's always kind of like subconsciously trying to cover it up?
Like I have contemplated myself what that's really about, why he does that. And I didn't have a clear idea.
A sticky, sweet smell to him. I thought dead body for some reason.
Right, it could be that. There was actually several scenes that I had to cut out where Joel and Stoner experienced that sickly sweet smell several other times, but had to cut it because the movie was running too long. But it could totally be that. But I also just thought, what would be more evil than somebody who like is huffing air fresheners and rubbing it all over their body? You know, those like those things are brutal enough by themselves, but like to crack a fresh one open and rub it all over your body and to huff it, it's some
This guy's a
pretty evil shit.
monster. Have you ever seen Jordan
Exactly.
Peele's Get Out?
That's another one I've been meaning to watch forever. It's been on my
So-
list, but no, I haven't seen that one.
There's a scene where Jordan's trying to portray just how evil a character is, and the character's eating cereal, but like they keep the milk separate from the cereal, and they're just eating the cereal with their bare hands and drinking the milk. And a lot of people watching are just like, "Oh, it's a segregation thing. They're trying to keep the colors away from each other." It's like, and I saw an interview with him after the movie. He's like, "I just wanted people to like how evil is this person?" It's like, "Oh, this bitch is sinister. Look what she does." Who does that?
That's so good. Anyone who does that's a psychopath. I'm sorry. You got to eat your cereal with milk in it.
And then they're going to pick up the couch. And then there are all of those men just, in their tactical gear at the end of their driveways. They're functionally the same as Stoner, but now that he's with Joel and Joel's kind of bringing him down, they could just laugh at it and they don't see the irony in it.
Right. A lot of times we can't look outside of ourselves. We don't realize that we're just like everybody else. Stoner's kind of trying to justify him a little bit, but he's making fun of the Confederate reenactors for dressing up and is unable to see himself the way they see him, which is really fun.
That's another strength of his character too, because all throughout the movie you get these moments where it's almost a mirror reflection of what he's doing. Like when Joel's talking to him about religion, it's like, were your folks Baptist? He's like, Baptist? Those people are crazy. And in the same breath, he's talking to Joel about how God's talking to him and giving him a mission.
Right. Yeah, and that's really it. That's kind of the core of what the film is about. He is just 100% the most over-the-top walking contradiction that exists. And I just know so many people that are like that. And I don't dislike them as human beings. I dislike the shit they say and the way that they act and the things that they preach at other people when, truthfully, it's just a terrible, terrible contradiction. And I think that's what a lot of America is about, and a lot of what American religion and American Christianity is about.
Yeah. I mean, my overall thought is at the end of the day, if you're a good person, like, forget the rituals and anything that divides you. If you're specifically looking for people's differences, you're not really using religion in the way that it's meant, which is to bring down walls. But
right,
I think at the end of the day, no matter what you believe, as long as you're still good towards other people and good to yourself, you've got it.
I agree. And I think that that's the key to it all. Kurt Vonnegut said it, God damn it, you got to be kind. But all you have to do is read the Sermon on the Mount to understand what being a Christian is supposed to be about. It's all right there.
What is your favorite scene of the movie, personally?
My favorite scene of the movie?
Yeah.
Wow. Nobody has asked me that question. It's probably either the scene where Maurice is going through the motions, doing his psychotic nonsense with the air fresheners, just because we laughed so hard while we were doing it. It was seriously just me and Alec in his shop. And it smelled absolutely rancid. I'll never forget any of that. But that or the couch pulling scene, it's not my favorite scene because I had really hoped that the leaves would still be on the trees that fall and that we'd get this big burst of color in the background. And it was much later by the time we were able to shoot that scene than I wanted. But regardless, fun because we actually did that as teenagers, hooking up a couch and just pulling it around a yard, riding on it like a bunch of idiot rednecks.
It's one of those
like just doing stupid stuff out in the country. Right.
I don't know if you've seen the meme of like, you didn't grow up in the South unless in high school you were dying of like vodka poisoning in a field during like a house party.
Exactly.
I think my favorite line in the movie is Stoner saying like, Joel's forgotten the old ways, like how Southerners handle their moments of crisis and they just get fucked up and fuck around.
Exactly. And that was it, right? That's so true. Nothing made up about that. But Joel was actually absolutely obliterated by the time we got done filming that. I mean, he's pretty lit and drunk while he's getting pulled around in that couch in that scene. Because I kept telling Mike, who's one of the Confederate reenactors, he wasn't in character, but he was on the set with us, and I kept telling him, I was like, do not give Joel any more tequila. For real. He's down half of the fifth right now, and we got to finish this. And I turned around, and there's Joel running away from Mike. It has the bottle, and he's doing some more hits off of the bottle of tequila, but he was obliterated by the time we finished that scene. So it was very real to life. And we loaded the couch in the back of the truck, and we're driving out of the woods, and he's like laughing his head off, talking about, man, what a great day. We're drunk. I'm in a couch in the back of a truck, and it was just like we were 16
Doesn't get
again,
better.
you know?
So in the scenes where Stoner's kind of like touching on his mission, there are little parts of like a sex scene interspersed. Was that stock footage?
Yeah, no, those were actually folks that we found, and I tasked my wife Sarah with doing that. This is a pretty wild film in general. I don't want to like reach out to folks and say, "Hey, we're going to do this. Your face is not going to show up," because all I want it to be is this representation of like sin and sex. Also, I don't ever want to insult somebody by by asking somebody, "Do you want to be in this film, but just be naked and do some twerking?" Because that's not how I talk to actors or dancers or whoever I'm putting in films. But my wife is an extraordinary people person, so she managed all of that.
All things considered, probably the best way to handle it.
Yes, yes. There's also a series of graphic novels that are getting made
Ooh.
about the Gunfighter Paradise world. So I've got the first one that happens after the film written. I'm going to do 4, and then we're going before the film happens and writing another 4. And I'm working with an absolutely extraordinary artist who's published in all of the major graphic novel publishers. I'll spill the beans on all that later on once we actually have our release date in place. That will say, really right now, the best way to support indie films is just by people getting involved and asking and demanding their local theaters bring their films so they can come out to the theaters and watch them. And until we get a proper offer from a proper distributor, we're going to continue to do that, because I just refuse to sign up with an aggregator and watch the film slip down into the trenches underneath, purchase on Apple TV or purchase, on Amazon Prime.
Yeah. Just disappearing into slop content.
Exactly. Even if it's just selling Blu-rays off the website for the rest of the time, I'm fine with that. And there's a whole lot of reviews that are coming out in the next 2 weeks before we release theatrically. So all I want everybody to take away from it is that, if you like really fun, wild, independent films, it's good to get behind them and get them brought to your city. So fingers crossed, we'll be seeing a lot more theaters coming up soon. Can't count our chickens yet, but that's the aim. I'm constantly knocking on wood, because I spent probably a good solid year after film festivals trying to get to this point that we're at right now. And so many wonderful things have been happening. It's been a lot of work, but I think it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Dreadful Waters, ladies and gentlemen. And then, applause, screams, people throwing bras on bombs or whatever on stage.
People running in terror.
Oh, I guess we could end on this. I think my second favorite scene is the Excalibur bolt cutter.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
That was so much fun. That's one of my best friends on planet Earth. Everybody in the film, of course, are all my oldest friends. But Haley, who is the lady in the lake in that scene, is my production designer and art director and so many other things. We went out to upstate New York at some national park. We probably shouldn't have been in there doing what we were doing, but we did it anyways. And it was an absolute blast. That scene never fails to get the greatest chuckles ever, because I think a lot of people get the reference immediately.
Okay, well, one more question, and then we could tie things up. I don't want to take up too much of your time. What do you think the role of God in this movie really is? Like, is God an actual character, like, behind the scenes guiding events? Is it maybe more something to do with the mother, the way that, she seems to always have a plan for everything? She gave, I guess, the perfect guidance to her sons after her death, the exact thing they need to hear to maybe cross paths again and get themselves together. Because the bolt cutters tie into that too. Was that actually, like, maybe he did find it somewhere obscure, or was that actually gifted to him by the lady of the lake? Or is that just, it's kept vague?
Yeah, that
you can keep it vague.
No. I mean, I think the bolt cutters are very vague on purpose. Everyone reads that differently, and everyone gets a different take on God's role. But I think to your question about the role of God in this film is a really good one, especially when you're talking about the mother, in that there's not very many voices of reason in the film. You could kind of say Joel is one, but he kind of moves over to the side of Stoner being a good friend and being empathetic. So he's less of a voice of reason and more just a companion that we can relate with. You have Rhoda, who's a neighbor. She's kind of a voice of reason. But really, the true voice of reason in the film is the mother, even though she's kind of being cryptic and it's full of riddles. But she's saying a lot of beautiful things, which are loose interpretations of a lot of my favorite writers and poets and philosophers. And so I think she's not a deity, but the projection of a voice of reason giving you guidance that you oftentimes ignore and you get into trouble, that plays a big role in the film. There's a very specific reason why the mother is there, giving these clues as to what might help you if you're lost. Stoner continually seems to ignore those and get in worse and worse circumstances. But
well, with Rhonda and the mom specifically, it seems like a lot of the female presence in the film is grounded in this like nurturing spirituality, whether it's like directly tied to the God and faith or not.
Exactly, right. That's kind of the idea.
Sage wisdom. Okay, one more question.
There you go.
Sorry.
Oh, no, we're good.
But the name stoner, in my mind, it has two different meanings. Stoners as like, drug users, people that kind of waste their time on something that isn't enriching them or furthering their lives, or he without the sin, throw the first stone. Is there something different in the name that I'm not seeing, or am I close?
Yeah, well, the reason that he's named Stoner is a very, very simple and stupid reason. It's because I had a great uncle named Stoner, and I just thought that was so cool. He was like World War II vet. He was an artist, an amazing painter, and he was just kind of this straight-laced, pocket protector with a bunch of pins in them, button-down shirt, hair parted perfectly, super Southern guy with bird feeders, right? He had this really amazing presence about him, and he was named Stoner, and I just was like, what? Who named their child Stoner? That's insane and awesome. And when I knew him, I was too young to understand that stoner meant something else. With coming up in 1960s culture, that's like, oh, he's a stoner, right? So I just knew Stoner as like the coolest name ever. I was like, God, I wish my name was Stoner, not Jethro. Jethro's, bonkers. So it was always rolling around in the back of my head. Then when I decided to start naming people in the film, I was like, you know what? Stoner's such a cool name. I'm going to name him that. And on top of it, there's a really, exactly. It sounds like a main character. And also there's a really silly Easter egg. The guy who invented the M16, which became the AR-15, is a guy named Eugene Stoner.
Oh.
And so that's why there's Eugene. And there's also the reference for Stoner there. So I didn't. That. Yeah, so that's a really deep cut. There have been some folks who know guns and gun ranges a lot that have come to see the film that have been like, does Eugene Stoner have anything to do with it? And I was like, wow, I didn't expect anyone to get that.
Well, when you provide people something to dig into, if they like it, they're just going to look further.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun because, there's so many little silly things. Not even half of them have been brought up yet. But obviously the film hasn't been out that long, so I'm sure they'll all be covered at some point as long as we can keep getting this film in front of people's eyeballs.
I agree entirely. We've had like about an hour and a half conversation, and we're not even close to digging into everything in here. Jethro, thank you for coming on, man. This has been a pleasure, a blast. Thanks to Kelly for setting this up.
Yeah, Danny, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for having me on and having a great conversation and digging so deep into the film. I appreciate it, and I can tell you from the entire cast and crew and everybody that's worked on it that they appreciate it as well. I'm sure they're going to have a good time listening to this.
And with that, folks, we will see you next time.